is going on, traders? Happy Friday. Thank you guys so much for tuning back in. But as usual, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys know exactly how it went for me trading wise. So let's jump right into it. And as you guys can see from the screen, it was a red day overall on my account, right? Tesla, as you guys can see, actually ended up dropping, right? Lots of that buying pressure did end up dying out eventually, right? And so as we can see, as far as how I did day trading wise, I traded both SQs and TQs. I finished up $50 on SQs and I pretty much was broken even on TQs. And so as you guys can see, I only had 18 orders today. So I took the least amount of trades out of the week today, right? And so I'm just glad I'm able to finish the week off on a green note. I was up, nearly 3% on the week. So it's definitely a step in the right direction, recovering from the past few red weeks, right? And so these were all my filled orders, but I'm going to go ahead and explain to you guys exactly what I saw going on, right? So as far as, what ended up happening, the NASDAQ was trading, around these levels, right? Between the top and the bottom VWAP all during the pre-market session, right? And so as far as what I was paying attention to, I noticed that around these levels, we were still very overextended, right? There was definitely a chance that it can pull back, just given how it's been trading the past 10 days, right? As you guys can see, we were approaching these general resistance areas that we even had, on May 1st, right? And April 30th around this area. And so once we continue to validate this as a resistance, we finally broke above it, right? And so given the fact that we broke above it, we were a bit more on the overextended side. And so that's why I was mostly focusing on SQQQ today. And so as far as what actually ended up happening, you guys can see, right? As soon as market opened, we picked up a bit. And right around here is when I started to take my first few trades on SQQQ, right? It made sense to me on why this thing could potentially get rejected, right? We saw it act as a resistance level, right? This general area during the pre-market session once here and once here again, right? Where anytime we would approach this level, it would end up peaking out, right? And starting to sell back off to the bottom VWAP, right? It would push up, peak out, and start to sell off to the bottom VWAP. So I saw that exact same pattern going on. Right, we pushed up during market open and then started to sell off. I got into SQQQ and I actually, locked in profits very prematurely. Once this thing pulled on back here, I cut my trade here for the most part, right? And wasn't really, too focused on getting into SQQQ anymore. The main reason for that was I wasn't sure if we were going to pull on back and experience, some form of support because we were bouncing around the bottom VWAP during the pre-market session, right? And I wanted to, put myself in a good position and not be hopeful. So once, I let the market start to play out, I did miss out on these really nice sell-offs, unfortunately. And just, just in hindsight, looking back at it, wow, this thing really sold off, right? If you got in, near the top and were able to ride this thing down with SQQQ, it's triple leverage, right? So this really would have been about a 3.6 or more percent, trade right here. And so that's obviously very nice to see how it actually ended up playing out, right? But as far as why I ended broken even on TQQQ, I was letting this thing sell off, but I wasn't too sure exactly where we were going to find a bounce. And so as you guys can see, right, started to get into TQQQ right around 706, right? And then I bought back in with another half at 912. And so at 706, where was this trading? So this thing had sold off, right, very aggressively. We had this really aggressive sell-off, picked back up to EMA and continued to sell off here. And so the reason why I decided to buy in here was I thought we were going to potentially bounce there, given the fact that, this area does typically tend to act as a support level, right? If you keep in mind where the new resistance levels are, right, now that we've broken above these resistance levels, we're finding a resistance around this area and a general support around here, right? So I thought we could potentially, form a bounce before we continue to sell off. And that's really where I went wrong on the day, right? As you guys can see, this thing, initially bounced and was going in my favor, but it started to sell off and form these lower lows and lower highs. It continued to sell off all day. I still never cut my trade, right? I was down a decent amount by this point. I was probably down around, $90 on the trade, maybe even more. So I was definitely in the red, but this thing finally ended up recovering on the later half of the day, right? And I was able to cut my trade at market close once it did pick back up to the middle VWAP, right? So that's how I was able to walk away with a broken even day on TQs, right? I initially took a big loss by this thing falling, and as it ended up pushing back up, I was able to cut it, from where I bought in. But if I had just been patient, right, and really let the margin form, right, I should have really let this thing fall to, not once it broke below this support, right, this previous support it had, the next support it could have bounced at was around these general areas, right, where it's pulled on, tended to bounce around here, pushed on down, and then bounced, right? So once this thing continued to sell off to closer to these levels, it provided a nice, little margin for a TQ's position. So the Nasdaq itself, hit lows of 13,310, ended up pushing up to 13,401, right? So nearly, almost a 100-point move up on the way, on TQs if you were to ride that thing up. But there was definitely a lot of money to be made on SQs today, but if you were patient enough to wait for the reversal, right, you ultimately could have made money there too. But as far as where the Nasdaq's headed, we did just validate that resistance up there, right? So we can potentially start a pull on back, right? We just need to follow up with it day by day and see what ends up happening. But that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about in today's video. I hope you guys all were able to end green on the day and on the week. But that's pretty much everything. My brother will be posting a recap on Monday, so we hope to see you guys then. Have a nice weekend, take care, and we will see you guys then.